Welcome back to another episode of the GR8 podcast. I don't think I'm ever going to get over that and actually saying it seriously, but hey, here we are talking about Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantamania, the beginning of Phase 5 of the MCU. Seems very weird to say that, honestly. It feels like just yesterday we were in Phase like 2 or 3, getting ready for our Endgame and the implications of that. But here we are, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, starring Paul Rudd, Evangeline Lilly, Jonathan Majors, and a bunch of other people. Here we go. You know, big. This is a big movie. I don't think. I mean, I feel like everybody says this, that movies, like a new movie comes out, part of a franchise, and people are like, I've never seen this kind of movie ever been polarized like this. There's so many people on opposite ends of the spectrum saying this movie is good, saying this movie is bad. Saying, and very little are people saying that like it's in the middle. I would subscribe to that idea, I think. However, I have seen a little bit more opinions about the movie being a little bit in the middle. You know, like a little bit like a 5 out of 10, a little bit mid. Not really feeling it, but you know, it's serviceable. And I just want to hop on this podcast and honestly tell you my review of the movie, but talk about what that specifically means, I guess. I'll talk about the movie as like a review, things I like, things I didn't like. Start off with things I did like because, you know, we always want to hear good news first. The title, you know, pretty basic thing, but I like the idea of Quantumania. I think that's a cool title. I don't think they would have done that back in the earlier phases. In fact, with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, I think those kinds of titles are cool. And with Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, I think that's also a very cool subtitle. I think these titles are cool. I think they're getting a little bit creative with them. And I really appreciate that. I love Kang. Kang's in this movie. A lot of Kang. Jonathan Majors. His costume I thought was really cool. You could see in certain scenes where there's light, like his suit seemed a little bit glossy and reflective. Paul Rudd and the other Ant-Men, I guess part of the protagonist group, their costumes are, it seems like felt or leather or whatever it's made out of. It's not reflective. There's not a whole lot of metal to it, so none of the light was reflecting off. But they used a specifically different texture for Jonathan Majors, for Kang, and his costume. Probably is all CGI, and we'll get to that later. But the costume seemed actually pretty cool. It seemed very, very reflective, very colorful, very comic accurate to the Kang in the comics. I loved Kang's acting. I love Jonathan Majors. You could even from when he's talking very quietly and not talking in a commanding voice, he still has something to say. He commands the scene even when his voice isn't commanding itself. But when his voice starts yelling, big, loud, angry, he obviously steals the scene in that regard too. So Jonathan Majors has very, very serious acting chops. He's blowing up on Hollywood, but he's been around for a while. But he's blown up with this movie and then Creed 3. I'm proud of him. I like his interpretation of Kang. I like how serious he is, how calculated he is, yet how rageful and angry and loud he can be. I love his powers. I love Kang's powers. I loved how just they didn't make sense. I love like the idea of going down to the quantum realm and not like anything making sense, even down to Kang's powers. How does it work? How does he almost seem like he has the Force, as he can control things in the space that he's in? He can move people around without touching them. He can just look at them or just raise his hand and they just move all about. I love that idea, and it's all based off his like futuristic technology. So that's kind of crazy. Like he has such technology. He has technology that has literally advanced and surpassed the laws of physics. I think that is so cool. You can use shields and you can shoot things out of his hands. Shooting beams out of his hands seem like very, very like superhero-ish, but I think it's just cool because all he has is just a suit and technology. Him himself almost has nothing. So I think that kind of idea is pretty cool. Most of the CGI I thought was okay. It's very serviceable, I believe. But when I think halfway through this movie, like most of this movie is just down in the quantum realm, just like everything. The whole movie is basically in the quantum realm. I think like 10 minutes is dedicated to like the real world. But most of the CGI goes into making the quantum realm, making the colors, making the imagination believable. And I think halfway through this movie, I just forgot that I was watching an MCU movie, because a lot of MCU movies are like dull color grade, deal with like San Francisco as the earlier Ant-Man movies, or New York, just gray, black, and white color tones, and almost feels like a very dulled out colors for the costumes. I really enjoyed watching something that was very colorful, was popping out to me out on the screen. However, I think that's a detriment, and we'll obviously get into the things that I didn't like, and believe me, there's a lot of them, but I think there's a little bit of detriment with all the CGI. And granted, you know, sometimes the MCU CGI isn't doing so well because they're overworking their CGI and animation workers and not paying them enough. So, but that's besides the point. I felt like I wasn't watching an MCU movie. I think it's because I fell into this. I don't even know what I was watching, because there's so much CGI. Everything on the screen is CGI. Everything is a green screen. Everything is a blue screen. Everything was made in post. And that's what made me fall out of the believability of, or belief system that like, I don't know what I'm watching. I don't know what is going up on that screen because there's so much going on visually that I can't hone in on like the themes that they try to talk about the movie. But sorry, this is talking about the things that I do like. So, but most of the CGI is okay. It's serviceable. But the way that I look at it is that if you look at so much CGI throughout a whole movie through like 2 hours of it, by the end of it, you're going to be like, okay, it looks good to me because that's all I can see. So these are, and then other things that I like, the surface level implications for the MCU, how Kang, this is all spoilers, but Kang quote unquote dies at the end of this movie. I don't really like that, but it's just like, what does that mean for the rest of MCU? What does that mean for Kang Dynasty? What does that mean for Secret Wars? What does that mean for the rest of the MCU? What does that mean for the next MCU movie? What does that mean for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3? What does that mean? And I like having that interest of a lot of it surrounding a villain. I think I like that. I talked about acting for Jonathan Majors, but I also want to talk about Paul Rudd's acting. I think he was great in this movie. Weirdly enough, I think he balances the tone of being very nice, happy-go-lucky Scott Lang with, you mess with him, you hurt something that he loves, like his daughter, and he will be angry. He will show rage against the ones who oppose him. Like there was a scene at the end and he's yelling at Kang. He's like giant man. He's like 200 feet tall or whatever. And he's screaming at Kang saying like, I'm going to beat you. And there's a whole lot of other things that he was saying, but he said it like, and I was convinced that Paul Rudd was actually angry, assuming filming that scene. So I really liked the acting in this movie for most of the main characters. Paul Rudd and Jonathan Majors, I think, did a very good job. Now, things I didn't like, and we'll stay on the topic of acting. I did not like Cassie Lang. I did not like Michelle Pfeiffer's character. I don't think Michael Douglas had much to do. I don't think Evangeline Lilly had much to do. I don't think their characters brought out a sense of wonder in this quantum realm. I don't think I ever cared for their characters. They could die and I just wouldn't care. Cassie Lang has a lot to do in this movie, even more so than the Wasp. And I just don't know how I feel about that because Wasp is in the title. And I know I said I liked the title before, but Wasp is in the title and she didn't have much to do. She didn't impact the story in very many ways unless being a deus machina. Like, well, she was in the major fights, don't get me wrong, she got a good amount of screen time, but I feel like she didn't impact things for the rest of the movie. I don't think she did things. She was always there to save Ant-Man, right? And then you're like, oh, that's doing something. Of course it is. But when you put in the context of she's so much of a different character than just saving Ant-Man, there's a point where Ant-Man was falling into a pit and he needed to get out of it and throw pin particles at the engine. And if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. And there's a whole bunch of like Ant-Man and he's falling and then Wasp just comes by, picks him up and they start shooting at it together. I'm like, okay, well, cool. And then later, at the very, very end of the movie, Kang is beating up on Ant-Man, beating him up. And I thought Ant-Man was going to die. And I wish he did, honestly. I thought Ant-Man was going to die. And then before Kang, throws the last blow or throws the last punch, Wasp just comes in, starts shooting him. And then, he just pushes him into the engine and the engine blows up or whatever. And then Kang, quote unquote, dies. I just didn't think that Wasp had that much to do outside of saving Ant-Man. I wish that she had more of a character arc. MODOK is the only character that had a character arc. He went from this weird, cross of, the MCU version of a character in comic books. They added Darren Cross as, the bad guy from the first Ant-Man, and now he's MODOK, a distorted body figure of this big head in a chair, the ultimate weapon. And at the end, he's like all beat up, and he's like, I don't know what to be. And Cassie Lang's like, don't be a dick. And he's like, okay, there it is. That's it. That's the movie. That's all MODOK had to be. And I didn't like MODOK. I didn't think he was funny. I think he was trying to be the comic relief when in reality, yes, he's a goofy character in most iterations of him, particularly in Marvel animation, like the Superhero Squad show or anything along those lines. He is a goofy character, but he's yet menacing. And he always has a lot of power. He always gives the Avengers a run for their money. I just don't understand what came from this idea that making MODOK a little bit of nerfed villain, like kind of making him goofy, kind of dumb, kind of stupid, not serious. And I get it, he's a big floating head, but he was made in the comics at least like this sense of he's a body horror type of villain. He's constantly in agony, he's constantly in pain, making him a bad guy. But in this story, he's just a goofy, floating, talking head. And I just didn't like that. And the fact that they try to bring in an older villain to just make him MODOK. MODOK is a different character other than Yellowjacket. He's a different character. I don't know. I just didn't like that. His CGI for MODOK is not the best. Seeing a giant floating talking head layered onto a green screen of like just massive buildings and colors, it just doesn't look good most of the time. And that's just kind of hard to do with, Marvel animation and CGI and things of that nature. But, I don't know if I want to give it a pass, just like the whole rest of this movie. Should I just give it a pass? Should I just congratulate it? Should I clap for letting it exist? Thank goodness this movie exists. Thank goodness this movie is serviceable when it's supposed to kick off Phase 5, probably their most important phase in the recent years. At least this is one of the most important movies in the recent years because it kicks off Phase 5. It kicks off their whole new set of story, this long arcing story, this multiverse saga. And also it introduces, at least in the proper way, Kang the Conqueror, the next big bad, the next Thanos of this movie, and the movie is just okay. Like, I thought, as are we just gonna let okay movies pass? Should this movie have been better? should we care about the movies that we watch? Do we just let these movies, these type of MCU movies that are churning out like I don't know, like on assembly line, like in a factory floor, just had these movies churning out like, it's okay. Oh, the next one's okay. Oh, okay, that's pretty good. Yeah, it's all right. And we just keep watching these movies. Like, I don't understand. Kang was supposed to be the big bad. And I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to be completely 100% honest. I know I talked about how I liked Kang, but I hated the way that he was treated in this movie. I hated it. I loved his acting. I loved how they built him up as this emperor of the quantum realm, this emperor, this conqueror of this realm. And he just gets beat up by Ant-Man. Like, no disrespect to Ant-Man and no disrespect to Paul Rudd, weirdly. But they have a fist fight, and sure, Kang is beating him, but there's no way that actual Ant-Man would, get in some punches, right? This is Kang the Conqueror. He mentions in these movies that he has destroyed hundreds, if not thousands, of versions of the Avengers. But in this movie, he gets killed by Ant-Man and the Wasp. He gets beat up by a bunch of ants. There's a whole ant army, and Kang gets killed by them, or at least beat. And then he shows up later. He's like, "Oh, I'm still here." Like, it's laughable. It's laughable. Remember at the end of Avengers 1? Remember at the end of the first Avengers, we saw Thanos. Like, whoa, who is that? I couldn't even, I remember watching it back in 2012. I didn't even know who that was, right? And then the Avengers Age of Ultron, he comes around, fine, I'll do it myself. And then we see him a little bit in Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, holy cow, this is a guy that's being built up over movie after movie and like hardly getting any lines, but you understand the threat that he obtains. Kang, I feel like he's a goofball. he's a goofball. He's a goofball. His powers are cool. His acting by the actor that plays him is cool. But I don't understand the threat of him. I'm not scared of Kang. And at the end of the movie, there's thousands of Kangs because the main three Kangs, all the variants come together and be like, all right, well, we need to take care of these people that are dealing with the multiverse. We need to take care of these people, or whatever they say. And then they span out to a massive coliseum full of Kangs, all of his variants. And I'm like, you got the same amount of Ant-Man. That's a fight for the ages, I guess. But I guess Ant-Man would win. I don't understand this. Kang did not turn out to be a menacing villain in the end. He was menacing in the movie of Ant-Man and the Wasp. He was a good villain in Ant-Man and the Wasp. But not for the rest of the MCU. What is he going to do for the rest of the MCU? How am I going to be convinced as an audience member for the third time that Kang is a malevolent force? He was already killed back in Loki, and that was like one of his quote-unquote nice variants. He's talking to Loki and Sylvie, just talking, explaining everything, and then Sylvie kills him. I'm like, okay, well, like we knew like the real version was coming, and then we see the real version in the trailers. You're like, okay, we got to get hyped for Kang. What could happen? And then at the end of this movie, Kang dies again. Who cares at this point? Who cares? If another Kang comes by and seeks to destroy Earth, just get Ant-Man on him. Just get Wasp on him. Just get a whole army of ants, and then boom, you're done for. You're good. And to those who were probably saying like, oh, this Kang wasn't at his full power, he didn't have all of his armor or whatever, within the thousands of years that he had in the quantum realm, with the quote-unquote little technology that he had, he became literally the ruler of the quantum realm. People with extraordinary powers, all different kind of life forms, and he just ruled over them. He had a whole army and spaceships and all kinds of things, and he was dominant over the quantum realm. And yet we're gonna be like, oh, like, that wasn't Kang at his full power. That wasn't the right Kang. That wasn't the correct Kang. That wasn't the Kang the Conqueror. That was some kind of variant. And I'm like, okay, well, when are we going to see the real Kang? Is it going to be third time's a charm with this like variant of Kangs? I don't know, man. I don't know. I was hyped for this movie in retrospect because I had this idea that like, this is going to be the beginning of Phase 5. We're going to be introduced to Kang the Conqueror, and Ant-Man's going to die. And that's another thing. To show that Kang is a formidable opponent, he could have killed Ant-Man. And I'm not saying that villains need to kill characters to show their dominance, to show their power. But that's the most basic form of it, right? Kill a formidable hero, a hero that we've known for a long time, kind of like Loki with Thanos. He snaps his neck and he beats up Thor and he beats up the Hulk. And that's like the first scene that we actually see him in, full view of. And Kang has a whole movie, and he can't even beat Ant-Man and the Wasp and Cassie Lang. He can't even beat an army of ants. Granted, I know he doesn't have the Infinity Gauntlet. I know that he doesn't have any of the Infinity Stones, but he had a whole army. He had a whole army. He had a whole empire. And he didn't do anything. He got killed. He got beat. So the next iteration that we see of Kang, is he going to be more popular? Is he going to be more powerful? Is he going to be more of a formidable opponent than his last iteration was? And what's stopping for the next Avengers movie? What's stopping Kang's next appearance? Them just killing them? It's like, oh, again, that wasn't like the real Kang. Oh, we'll just bring in another Kang. We'll just keep on signing Jonathan Majors to new movies, more and more movies. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this. This whole movie I was actually excited for because I like the title, I like Paul Rudd, and I like the idea of going into the quantum realm. I like the idea of the next big bad of the MCU, and it failed. It didn't do it. It didn't live up to the hype. It doesn't matter anymore. The MCU is gone. I'm being very drastic and dramatic. But at this point, like, when are we going to, how many times are we going to just roll over and be like, okay, that was a good movie. Can't wait for the next one. Next one comes around. Okay, that was a good movie. Can't wait for the next one. Wakanda Forever was a good movie. But you know what? You know what was before and after it? Thor: Love and Thunder and Ant-Man: Quantumania. I hadn't even seen She-Hulk. Moon Knight was underwhelming. I like Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Hawkeye was kind of goofy. Those are the TV shows, I guess. Loki was cool. When, as MCU lovers, MCU watchers, Marvel Comics lovers, gonna get better? When are we gonna get better content? Has the MCU just exhausted all of its creative utilities? Have they feel like they've won the audience and now they don't have to do it anymore? It kind of feels like you've been searching for this. I'm a guy, so I'm going to talk from a guy's perspective. It's almost like you like this girl for a long time, throughout middle school and high school, and you try to flirt with her, you try to win her attention, and then you finally get to that point where you finally take her on a date and you ask her, can you be my girlfriend? Of course, you go through the honeymoon phase, but after time, you stop flirting with her. You stop trying to prove yourself to her. You stop trying to do things for her that make her like you. You just get in the stagnant place in life where you're just living with that person, right? That doesn't happen, all the time, but it sure does happen often. It happens in people's psyche. It happens in people's emotional, emotional minds, emotional availability. At some point, people just stop trying. And I think that's the case with the MCU. I think they've already got their billions of dollars. They already got all their characters set up, and now they're like, okay, what do we do now? Where do we go from here? We have so many characters, so many different storylines, so many different directors and writers that we want to follow through with. What do you do now? What's going on? What's going on now? This whole movie felt like a soulless cash grab. I didn't feel anything. I didn't learn anything new in this movie. I didn't know anything. I came out of this movie knowing the same thing that I went into this movie knowing. Ant-Man is still alive. Kang is still not a threat. It's sad. It's truly sad, and I wish the MCU would do better. I wish the MCU had something to it that gave it its new life. It's gone. It's sad. MCU is the only thing I'm really looking forward to now is Guardians of the Galaxy. But after that, what do we have? MCU has massive bangers, right? No Way Home, Shang-Chi. But when you look at Phase 4, what's there? What's leading to these different movies intersecting? It's supposed to be Kang, right? And he's dead. 1,000 more Kangs. And at some point, you got to be like, what's the point? What story are you trying to tell? What are you trying to say with all these movies? You know what? You know who is going to try to say something? You know who is going to try and give creative availability and creative overhaul for their different directors and writers? DC. That's what's going to happen. DC. DC Studios, James Gunn, the executive producer, and Peter Safran are going to give power to the directors. You know what they said in their 10-minute long video about talking about the next couple, the first chapter of the DC universe and their next couple projects? That their main idea was story is everything. Character is what is important. Telling stories that mean something is important. When will the MCU do the same? When has the MCU done the same? Back in Phase 1 when they had something to prove? Back in Phase 1 when they're trying to flirt with the girl? Trying to get her as their girlfriend? A couple years later, now down the line, they're up to Phase 5 and it's a dud. Got to ask, is this over for the relationship? Or for the relationship? Are we done? Is that it? Is there going to be something that gives it new life? And if so, what is it going to be? When is it coming? When's the right time? I'm sad. I wish this movie was more. And I don't want to be act dramatic for every time that MCU puts out a 5 out of 10 movie, but I truly hated this movie for everything that it means. There's some things that I did like, and that's okay, that's fine. But the things that I didn't like just mean so much to me. It stands out so much. I didn't learn anything. This movie didn't make me feel anything. Are movies just supposed to entertain you for 2 hours? Are they just supposed to put a whole bunch of colors and wacky aliens on screen and call it a day? Not have any form of long-term thinking, long-term storytelling? Is this it? I heard a month ago, roughly, that the ending of Ant-Man Quantumania was changed. They did reshoots to change the ending. Originally, Ant-Man and the Wasp were supposed to be stuck in the quantum realm at the end of the movie after killing Kang, giving this movie some sort of levity, some sort of weight. But the movie that we got, the theatrical release, the ending of that movie, they just allowed Ant-Man and the Wasp to step right back on home.
and then continue and do their own thing. They beat the villain, right? Is that it? Is that it? What's next? Guardians of the Galaxy. It's funny that Guardians of the Galaxy, the movie that I'm really excited for, is directed by James Gunn. That's the movie that I'm very excited for. Is James Gunn's last MCU outing because he's now the executive producer over at DC. That's just funny. It's funny to me. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you guys so much for hearing me rant about a stupid movie that is supposed to. I don't even like Ant-Man. I don't even like Ant-Man comics. I don't even like him as a character. I'm just these dumb movies just keep on disappointing me. And I'm supposed to sit in my seat every time and expect to like it, right? I'm supposed to like the movie, right? Cocaine Bear. It's not going to say anything, but I'm supposed to like it, right? Is it going to say something? I don't know. Probably going to say more than Ant-Man Quantamania. Probably going to be written better too. CGI's going to probably be better too. All right, whatever. Get out of here. I'm leaving. Bye.